This is Dust and Ballads, where the legends of the Old West rise again in story and song. The wind carries more than dust out here. It carries whispers of a man who rides with a coffin chained behind him, a white horse beneath him, a black dog at his side. And inside that coffin, not a body, but a storm of iron and fire. They say he came to Hollow Creek when the town was dying, when a gang of wolves bled it dry, and the sheriff lay cold in the ground. They say a priest begged him for help, and he answered with the sound of justice. This is a gun, a coffin, and a white horse, a classic Western tale of heroism, redemption, and love, born from the ashes, told in first person, carried by original ballads. Subscribe to Dust and Ballads, leave your mark in the comments, and keep the lantern lit for the next ride into the West. The desert is a place where a man hears his own sins whisper louder than the wind. Out there, beneath the blazing sun, nothing survives except the strong, the stubborn, and the damned. I had been all three at one time or another. My white horse carried me with the patience of a saint, his hooves steady on the cracked earth. The coffin dragged behind us, its wooden edges grinding against the dust and stone, chains rattling like a death march. And padding beside me, loyal as the shadow of my own soul, walked my dog, a black Labrador, his coat gleaming like oil, his eyes sharp and faithful. They said a man with a coffin was cursed. Maybe they were right, but I didn't haul that weight for superstition. Inside lay the Gatling gun, a storm of iron and fire waiting for the moment it was needed. Some men carried the Bible. I carried judgment. By the time Hollow Creek came into sight, my throat was raw with dust and the sun was bleeding itself out on the horizon. From a distance, the town looked like any other. A handful of wooden buildings, a church steeple, the crooked sign of a saloon. But as I rode closer, the silence told me everything. A town without children's laughter is already half dead. No hammer striking nails, no cattle lowing, no women calling from porches. Just shutters creaking in the hot wind, and faces vanishing behind curtains the moment I passed. I slowed my horse, letting the chains of the coffin drag louder, scraping across the main street. A man doesn't sneak into a place like Hollow Creek. He makes sure the devils know he's arrived. The church door opened and out stepped the priest. He was a gaunt figure, skin stretched thin, eyes red from sleepless nights. His cassock was patched and worn, but he carried himself with the dignity of a man who hadn't yet let the wolves tear out his soul. He looked at me, at the coffin, at the dog. His lips moved, whispering a prayer. Then he stepped forward. "Stranger," he said, his voice trembling but unbroken. "God must have sent you here." I dismounted, my boots sinking into the dust. The Labrador sat at my heel, ears pricked, watching. "Why's that?" I asked. The priest swallowed hard. "Our sheriff is dead. Shot down in broad daylight in front of his wife. Clayton Rourke and his men rule us now. They take what they want, when they want. Money, food, women, lives. We prayed for deliverance, and then you came, dragging a coffin." I spat the dust from my tongue, let my hand rest on the coffin's lid. "Deliverance doesn't come free, Father. It comes at a cost." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Then we are ready to pay it. Just tell me, will you help us?" I studied his face. There was no deceit there, no coward's plea, just the raw faith of a man watching his people crumble and praying for a miracle. Finally, I said, "Keep your doors locked tonight. Tell your people to stay off the streets. By tomorrow this town will breathe free again, or it'll burn with the men who choke it." The priest bowed his head, blessing me with a hand that shook like a leaf in the wind. I tied my horse outside the church, let the coffin rest heavy in the dirt. My dog stretched out beside it, panting, keeping watch. Then I walked down the street, boots echoing on the wooden planks. The saloon was alive with noise, rough laughter breaking glass, the sharp bark of a pistol fired into the ceiling. Shadows swayed behind the glowing windows, men drunk on stolen whiskey and power. The gang's horses were tied out front, restless and mean. I leaned on the hitching post, watching them paw at the earth. Inside, the men bragged about the sheriff they'd killed, about the town they owned, about the fear they carried in their pockets like coins. My dog growled low. "Easy, boy," I muttered. "Not yet." The door swung open, and two gang members stumbled out, half drunk. One carried a bottle, the other a girl by the arm, her face pale, eyes wide with terror. She looked barely old enough to be called a woman. I stepped into their path. The first man squinted at me, sneered. "Well, look here. Some stranger thinks he's man enough to block Clayton Rourke's boys." His buddy laughed, yanking the girl's arm. She cried out. My hand hovered over my revolver. The Labrador bared his teeth. "You don't want this fight," I said, voice calm, cold. The drunk spat at my boots. "And what's that coffin for? Yours?" Quicker than their whiskey-soaked minds could follow, my gun was out. One shot into the dirt between their boots. The echo cracked the night open like a whip. The girls screamed. The men froze. My dog lunged forward, snapping at their heels, forcing them back. "You tell Clayton Rourke," I said, holstering my gun, slow, deliberate. "There's a man in town who brought judgment in a coffin. Tomorrow he'll open it." They stumbled away, dragging the girl, muttering curses. The town was listening now. Behind every curtain, eyes had seen. In every heart, a spark of hope had been struck. And then I saw her. She stood at the far end of the street, cloaked in shadow. Strong, proud, her back straight, though grief weighed heavy on her shoulders. I knew her face before anyone told me. She was the widow, the sheriff's widow. Her eyes burned with something fiercer than sorrow, defiance. She looked at me like she could see the man I had been, the blood I had spilled, the coffin I dragged through the dust. I tipped my hat. She didn't flinch. For years, I'd carried nothing but iron and regret. But that night, under the hollow moon, something shifted in me, something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Tomorrow, when the sun rose over Hollow Creek, guns would thunder, blood would spill, and justice would come crawling out of that coffin. And maybe, just maybe, the widow's eyes would still be watching me when it was done.
I rode into Hollow Creek, chains dragging through the night. A white horse carried judgment, a dog by my side. The town was drowned in silence, shadows bowed in fear. But the coffin that I carried told them justice was near. At dawn the coffin opens and thunder will ride. The wolves of Hollow Creek will have nowhere to hide. With fire in the chamber and steel in my hand, I'll bring back the law to this broken land. The priest begged for mercy, the widow's eyes were flame. Her sorrow cut like iron, her courage spoke my name. The gang drank in the saloon, their laughter sharp and cruel. But I was the reckoning, the one they couldn't rule. At dawn the coffin opens and thunder will ride. The wolves of Hollow Creek will have nowhere to hide. With fire in the chamber and steel in my hand, I'll bring back the law to this broken land. Chains in the dust, a shadow in the street. The widow's gaze steady, my heart found a beat. The dog growled low, the horse pawed the ground. The hour was coming when guns would sound. At dawn the coffin opens and thunder will ride. The wolves of Hollow Creek
Dawn in the desert doesn't come gentle. It spills across the horizon like a blade of fire, cutting through the night. That morning, Hollow Creek was silent as a graveyard. Behind every shuttered window, families waited, breath held, prayers whispered. And me? I waited too. The white horse pawed at the ground, nostrils flaring. My black dog stood tense, ears high, teeth bared at shadows only he could smell. The coffin lay chained in the dust, lid ready to be opened. The time had come. I stepped into the street just as the saloon doors banged open. Out staggered Clayton Rourke's gang. A dozen men armed to the teeth, their eyes red from whiskey, their boots loud with arrogance. Clayton himself walked last, broad-shouldered, black hat low, a grin on his face that reeked of cruelty. "Well, well," he drawled, his voice dripping venom. "The coffin man thinks he can stroll into my town and scare my boys. You don't know Hollow Creek, stranger. You don't know me." I rested a hand on the coffin. "I know enough." The dog growled, deep and low. My heart beat steady as a war drum. Clayton laughed, tilting his head at his men. "Boys, let's show him what happens to heroes around here." They fanned out, hands drifting toward pistols, rifles, knives. The townsfolk peered through cracks in the windows, watching, trembling. And then, with the rising sun blazing behind me, I unchained the coffin. The lid swung open, and the Gatling gun gleamed like the wrath of heaven. Gasps rippled through the town. Some of the gang froze, others cursed, spitting fear through their teeth. "You've bled this town dry long enough," I said, my voice carrying across the street. "Now it's time you heard the sound of justice." My dog barked, sharp as a gunshot, and the street erupted. The first shots cracked the air, hot lead flying past my head. The Gatling roared back, spitting fire and iron, the chains rattling as the coffin shook under its fury. The gang scattered, some diving for cover, others charging with blind rage. One man fell screaming, his rifle tumbling from his grasp. Another tried to flank me, but my Labrador lunged, teeth sinking into his arm, dragging him down into the dirt. "Good boy!" I shouted, swinging the Gatling across the street. Bullets chewed through the saloon's porch, splinters raining like hail. Clayton ducked behind a barrel, firing wild. "Kill him!" he roared, his voice breaking under the thunder of the gun. Two of his men made a run at the horse, thinking to cut me down by stealing my mount. But the white stallion reared high, hooves striking like hammers, knocking one man into the dust. The other stumbled back, pistol falling from his hands. The townsfolk, emboldened by the chaos, began to stir. I heard shouts from the church, men grabbing axes, women fetching rifles hidden since the sheriff's death. Fear was breaking, courage flooding back into their veins. Still, the fight was brutal. One outlaw got close, too close, firing a shot that tore through my shoulder. I gritted my teeth, blood hot down my arm. Pain sharpened my focus. With a snarl, I drew my revolver, a clean shot to his chest. He dropped without another word. The widow appeared then, rifle in her hands, standing tall on the balcony of the general store. Her aim was steady, her eyes unshaken. She fired once, and a bandit fell, shot clean through the neck. The sight of her lit a fire in me I didn't know I still carried. Together we turned the tide. Clayton Rourke was the last. He stood in the open street, revolver in each hand, rage boiling out of him like smoke. "You think you're a hero," he bellowed. "You're nothing but a drifter with a coffin full of tricks." I stepped forward, blood soaking my shirt, the Gatling silent now. My revolver hung easy in my grip. "Maybe so," I said, "but Hollow Creek won't remember your name. They'll remember the day they were free. We fired at the same time. His bullet tore through my hat, grazing my skull. Mine struck true, straight through his chest. Clayton stumbled, dropped his guns and fell into the dust, his blood darkening the sand. Silence. Then the town exhaled as one. The gang was broken. Hollow Creek was free. The priest stepped into the street, tears on his cheeks, blessing the air with trembling hands. Children peeked from doorways, their eyes wide with awe. The people of Hollow Creek gathered slowly, hesitantly, and then with cheers rising like thunder. I holstered my gun. My dog sat panting, tongue lolling, proud as a king. The white horse stood tall, mane glowing in the morning sun. And the widow, she walked to me. Her rifle was still in her hands, but her eyes had softened. She stopped close enough that I could see the grief etched in her face, the strength that carried her through it, and the spark of something new, something neither of us expected. "You saved this town," she said softly. I tipped my hat. "No, ma'am, you saved it yourselves. I just brought the fire." But the way she looked at me told me there might be more to this story than guns and coffins. For the first time in years, I felt the weight on my shoulders lift, not gone, but lighter. The coffin was still there, chains heavy in the dust, but maybe I wasn't dragging it alone anymore.
The smoke still lingered on the street. The guns had all gone still. The chains lay quiet in the dust, the coffin cold and filled. But through the haze of sorrow, through the blood and cries, the only light that reached me was the widow's eyes. Her eyes were fire through the sorrow and pain, a beacon of hope in the pouring rain. When the gun smoke cleared and the town was free, her gaze was the only salvation.
Found its voice again. Children laughed at dawn. The priest rang out the chapel bell. The fear at last was gone. But I stood still, a drifter torn between the roads and ties, till I felt the weight of mercy in the widow's eyes. Her eyes were fire through the sorrow and pain, a promise of love in a land untamed. When the gun smoke cleared and the town was free, her gaze was the only salvation. A black dog near, the coffin still chained, but the burden less severe. For even a drifter, weary and wise, can find his redemption in the widow's eyes. Her eyes were fire through the sorrow. Gun smoke cleared and the town was free. Her gaze was the only salvation for me.
Justice doesn't always ride in with a badge on its chest. Sometimes it comes dragging a coffin through the dust, carried by a man who's lost as much as he's willing to give. Hollow Creek learned that freedom is never handed down. It's taken back, one bullet at a time, one prayer at a time, one stand of courage at a time. And though the road still waits for me, though the coffin still drags behind, I left that town with something I never expected. A reason to believe again. In the widow's eyes, I found not just gratitude, but the promise of a life worth more than vengeance. That's the tale of a gun, a coffin, and a white horse. A story of fire, redemption, and the kind of love that can rise from ashes. If you rode with me through this dust and blood, don't forget to subscribe to Dust and Ballads. Leave your mark in the comments and keep the lantern lit for the next Western story with original music. And if you want to ride deeper into the sound of this legend, head to the playlist soundtrack, where every ballad and every note carries the soul of the Old West. Until next time, partner, keep your aim steady, your heart true, and may the trail ahead always lead you home.